Hi folks, Harry Frank from Red Giant here. In this tutorial, I'd like to show you AV Club from Universe 2.1. AV Club simulates low-fidelity, grainy analog gear from years past. When you apply it to your type, you'll find that it gives it a sort of old-school, local access degraded feel. So let's take a moment and go through the settings in AV Club. I'm going to reset this to the default settings. And just take a quick browse through the presets. You'll notice we've got a number of different presets in here, and some of them are different colors. Now, the ones that are not in this light blue are actually different colors, and these will pull in a different tint color. But the others are simply using a different default color to show what they look like. And the reason is that AV Club actually works best on text that is not pure white. And there's a couple reasons for this. Now, the technical reason is that we have both a hue and luminance noise, and this noise is mostly applied to the edge, and this noise creates variance above and below the existing value. So if you're using a peak white, it doesn't have a whole lot to go above the existing value because it can't go any higher than a peak white. Now, the other reason, and this is a bit more nitpicky, is that older analog gear never actually used pure white. At best, you would have something what we would consider to be a 90 or 91% brightness, which we used to call TV white, which is basically a light gray. But aside from the old school nostalgia, technically you'll still want to keep it less than a peak white. In fact, I find something like a yellow or orange or even blue works really well with it. The settings are pretty straightforward. The source fuzzy is a filter that will create a little bit of blur to the input. And the blocky will actually create more of a digitized kind of look to your text. Tint is simply a tint color, and this comes back in when we use the blink down at the bottom, so we'll come back to this. Now, the edge freakout is more or less like a spill, as if you were shooting your text on an actual surface and pulling a key, and the key wasn't so clean. This is why this defaults to a green, but you can make this spill color whatever you'd like. I already mentioned these, but hue and luminoise are a big part of the look of AV Club. And note that these can go above and below 0, because we have a hue that can go positive or negative, and a luminance that can go brighter or darker. There's an overall sharpen. Just above that is something called Quantized Color, and this is essentially a posterize to your effect. Now, using a solid color, you're not going to see a whole lot of posterization, so I'll turn on a different color here. This is just using a gradient ramp that goes from green to purple. If I go into the quantized color and set this to something like 8, we'll start to see the colors get quantized. Now, the sharpen is actually happening after the quantization, so you might want to dial down the sharpen. And also note, a couple steps down, there's a post noise, and if I bring this post noise up a little bit, you'll see that it actually gives it a dithering kind of look. Now, this can either work against your quantization if you have it up too far, but if you dial it in just right, you can get that sort of dithered kind of look in your text. Let me turn off this source gradient. We also have a basic separation here. This separates the RGB channels. Jitter is pretty straightforward. If you have it up, it will have a small amount of jitter. Down here we have a shadow section, which by default has a little bit of wiggle to it. Kind of like the shadow is drifting in and out of alignment with the source. But if you want to turn that off, you can simply set the wiggle to 0. Now, I mentioned the blinking down here. This is an easy way to simply make your text blink on and off. In fact, let me disable the shadow. So if I hit play, you should see this blinking in and out of its opacity. However, if we set a color, let's say I set this tint strength to 100% and set this to red. If I click color blink, this will blink back and forth between the original and the tinted color. And that is AV Club. It's designed to give you a wide variety of either pixelated or sort of analog video style effects. It can also be used simply to give your perfectly clean text a bit more of an analog feel. My name's Harry Frank for Red Giant. We'll see you soon.